Welcome, Reds, to the 100% United pod. I'm your host, TC, and today I'm joined by Tim, the founder of the Niagara MUFC Supporters Club. Welcome to the show, Tim. Pleasure to have you here.
Oh, thanks for having me, mate. It's good to be here.
How you doing? All right?
Yeah, doing all right. Sort of it's getting kind of cool over here in Canada right now, but things are good.
Yeah, one of my favourite holidays when I was a kid, actually. I went to Niagara Falls. I still remember it like it was yesterday.
It's good to hear.
Absolutely loved it.
Awesome. Well, it's a great place to visit, and we're trying to paint Niagara Falls red these days. So
Superb, mate. Look, on today's show, we continue our build-up to United's Premier League campaign. We take a look at the latest transfer rumours, news, and look back at the under-23s game against Leicester. First, though, Tim, how are you feeling ahead of Saturday? A week too late, if you ask me, but finally we'll see the boys back at Old Trafford.
Yeah, absolutely. And I watched the friendly against Villa, but it just wasn't the same. So it's a good distraction from the transfer window, and it's all about the football, isn't it? So to get football back and get United back proper it's going to be a good weekend. That's for sure.
Yes, it is. It is nice to have. Of course, we'll touch on the transfer merry-go-round a little bit later on. But I mean, I would have hoped that we had everything sorted by the weekend. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen by the looks of things unless an absolute miracle strikes. But look, we're 3 points behind already. Our rivals really for that top four and for the title, if you want to be optimistic as well. Before we get into the next season, you're a new voice on the show. Mm-hmm. It's always nice to have another opinion. Can I just ask your view on last season? Did you think the progress was there in terms of the team and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer as a boss? And were you happy with how it all turned out?
Yeah, I think by and large, obviously finishing third and getting back into the Champions League, that was the ultimate goal. I don't think anyone realistically thought that we were going to be challenging for the title. So to get into the Champions League was huge. At the start of the season, I think we all thought that, especially how the season started, that it looked like we were going to fall outside of the top four. I think you almost need to break the season down into two parts, because I think that with the way that Solskjaer wants to play with the 4-2-3-1 and how important, a number 10 and how lacking we were in that department. And like we saw that early in the season. I mean, the team that we're playing this weekend, Crystal Palace, 71% possession when we played them last season, and just unable to break them down. And teams were essentially giving us the ball and saying, we dare you to break us down. We're just going to stop your counterattacking. I think that when Bruno came in, that really changed, and we saw sort of his vision, Ole's vision, go to the sort of, up a notch or go to the next level in terms of how he wants to play. So I think that the signings that he made coming into that season, and certainly the system that he wants to play, I think that all in all, we did see improvement. There's actually the signings that he's bringing in are geared towards the way he wants to play, and it's not mercenary footballers anymore. And so I think progress was made, and people want to look at the points total and say, oh well, 66 points. It's the worst points total for a team that's qualified for the Champions League. But I mean, it's not a fair barometer to look at, I don't think, when you just look at the points. So I would say all in all, that I was happy with the progress.
Yeah, and Chelsea finished below us anyway, so they've got to have the worst record, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I think you're right. I mean, Bruno obviously came in and changed everything, didn't he? He just lit the place up with his attitude and with his playing style as well, and just the pure numbers, goals and assists as well. Mm-hmm. We've, of course, added to that now. We've got Donny van der Beek alongside him, so we're going to have even more of a chance against those lesser sides. And you know what? You've just reminded me of the past when sometimes we'd go toe-to-toe with the top teams, and, we might miss out by a goal. We might drop points in the really big games, but we'd always just trample through the rest of the league. And that's the first thing you want to do when you're going up and trying to close that gap on 1 and 2 and of course go on and win a title. Mm. And actually, one thing you'd have to say in the first part of the season, when we didn't have Bruno, Ole set up in a certain way that we actually took points off those big teams, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it was almost back to front, where we came out and smashed City and Tottenham in a week, I think it was, back in December. And we took points off Liverpool like no one else managed to.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing it in the games where you wouldn't expect us to, but in the lesser games, as you mentioned, the Palace one, the Watford one, God, there's too many to mention, right? Burnley, dear me.
Yeah.
So, it was almost like Ole did the hard work first,
Yeah.
and then Bruno came in and put the cherry on top.
Well, that's it. And with our pace sort of in the team, we always knew that against those top teams, we were going to have the way we set up, and then we knew they were going to have a go and that we were going to get at them at the counter. On the counter, it was always those games where we had to break teams down, where in the past we were able to do that because we had creativity in those positions where you're required to have creativity to break teams down. When you're relying on players, and I don't like to slate our players, but when you're relying on players like Lingard and Pereira to operate in those areas of space just outside of the 18-yard box to help you break teams down, the creativity just isn't there. And Bruno just had a massive, massive impact in that area.
Yeah, he did. One thing I'd like to ask you about really is the end of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we did get into the Champions League, but we got ourselves into a very strong position, and then we kind of stumbled over the line a bit, didn't we?
Yeah.
Also in the Europa League, we got ourselves into those quarterfinals, and then we stumbled into the semis, and then fell on our faces, of course, against Sevilla. So my big worry at the moment is that when we saw it throughout the season, whenever we saw the tip of the mountain, we started stumbling. Did you see that as well? Do you think that's something? I mean, we've got a young team, we've got an inexperienced manager, if you like, at the very top level. Mm-hmm. Is that still a worry for you that when we see, I mean, of course, the Leicester game, the pressure was on and we actually came through that. Mm-hmm. Although we did leave it pretty late in the end, didn't we? I was sure we scored that penalty earlier, but then when I look back on it, when I was doing the season review, I was like, blooming hell, was that around the 70-minute mark? Dear me. That's one big worry I still have over this team. Do you share that, or do you have a different view?
Well, I think until we add sufficient squad depth, it's going to be an issue for us. I think that's when you look back at it, Ole Gunnar, he settled on his first 11. It pretty much picked itself after lockdown once he got everybody fit. And I think that, when you're just the amount of games and the fixture congestion over that period, it was like 4 games within a 2-week span until the end of the season. I mean, that's just a heck of a lot of games, and not having sufficient squad depth. And certainly, I think that was on display when Ole would leave his substitutions so late. And who would you go to from that United bench to make an impact in a game? And it just wasn't on. So I think that contributed to a lot of it. And I think that it's such coming back from Corona as it is, and playing, footballers are very much creatures of habit. So when you're coming back, they like the routine, and you're coming back and playing, sort of games in the summer when you should be off. There's a bit of that aspect to it as well. So maybe there was a bit of fatigue that crept in mentally as well. But I just feel as though until that squad depth issue is addressed, and I know we're going to get into this season, but you just worry about this season as well as, what's going to happen after Christmas if we don't have that squad depth, and we're relying on. We saw what happened with Marcus Rashford last year early in the season when he was carrying an injury and wasn't able to get sufficient time to rest. It just manifested into a bigger injury. So yeah, it's a definite concern for sure.
Yeah, I do agree, of course. I mean, the squad depth isn't there. I do also think Ole has, he has taken a while to pull the trigger on the substitutes, hasn't he? I mean, especially in that Sevilla game, waiting till the 88th minute and then bringing in a Gala one on the 93rd, was it? I think was extremely late. Now, look, I do agree. But I also think that Ole does have a little bit of a habit of alienating the players that he leaves out and almost sort of discarding them for months on end. And of course, we don't know exactly what goes on inside the club. We don't know exactly who makes every single decision. Yeah. But at the same time, we did lose your Lukaku's, your Sanchez's, your Herrera's, all players who would have been good options in those games. I'm not saying we should have particularly kept them, but I think we definitely should have replaced them. And then, of course, in January, we went chasing Haaland. We ended up getting Ighalo in,
Mm-hmm.
Bruno right at the end. As I say, I don't know exactly who's making those decisions, but at the same time, if you're crowing from the rooftops that I've cleared out the deadwood, but then you don't trust the people you've got left behind,
Mm-hmm.
when does, do we have to clear out that whole bench and replace them? Because we're not great at getting 5 or 6 transfers in a summer. So it's, for me, it's still a question mark in terms of the balance of that squad.
Mm-hmm.
And I still think someone like Ighalo is, if you're going to sign him and you're going to extend his contract,
Mm-hmm.
then he's got to be worth bringing on as an option. I mean, look, who scored the winner for Sevilla? It was Luke de Jong, wasn't it? And
Yeah.
we wouldn't have brought him off our bench,
Well,
but Sevilla brought him off their bench and he scored against us. So sometimes you need a bit of a change, even if it's obvious that Martial and Rashford are
mm-hmm.
better players than your Ighalos, if you like.
Well, I mean, for in regards to the players going out, obviously the players that he sent out just didn't fit his system. But I think that he probably looked at it. I mean, we were looking at who you have available on your bench. Your front three has scored over 60 goals this season. He's probably looked at it and said, if the players that I have on the pitch versus Ighalo, where's my best option what's my best option in terms of potentially getting a goal out of this game? And
Yeah.
as good as Ighalo was sort of starting out, I mean, I know he wasn't given as much of an opportunity after lockdown, but in terms of, Odion Ighalo, I just feel like the fairy tale is sort of over with him.
I know, but then why did we extend his contract then?
Well,
It's weird, right?
Well, I just don't think that. I just don't. I mean, that's. I'm sure we're going to get into the transfer window as well, but I just don't think that it's on with the board and being able to back. And it's one thing to start throwing money around, but the board, the structure of it, the whole setup is just wrong in terms of recruitment and being able to bring in players. So,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I do agree on that.
I think that falls on them more than it does on the manager in terms of, who we get.
Yeah, I as I said, we don't know the ins and outs, do we? That's the hard thing as fans looking from the outside.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I will say is that Martial and Rashford scored 1 goal in those last 6 games of the season,
Yeah.
and it was against Lask. It was when Martial promised Ole that he'd score within 5 minutes and kept his promise.
Yeah.
So the goals did dry up, and you could say that maybe you're right saying bringing Ighalo in for one of those games wasn't right, but then possibly earlier on, when possibly Rashford was struggling, it would have been worth putting Ighalo in for a game, putting Martial out on the left. It's something that, as a manager, you kind of just got to make work, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how you do it, but if you end the season with your first 11 almost crawling over the line, Bruno Fernandes was absolutely, he was buggered, wasn't he?
Yeah, you could tell.
You do, like back in the Fergie years, for instance, he'd just make it work, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
He'd just make it work.
Yeah, that's fair.
You'd see a midfield and you'd think, what are you doing? I mean, why have you picked that team? And at the end of the game, you'd be, how's he pulled that off?
Yeah.
But those were glorious days, weren't they? So, look, in terms of looking to the new season, I mean, first of all, are you happy with Ollie's job so far? You think that we are going in the right direction and we're doing the right thing by, well, I would say backing him, but at the moment they're not really backing him in the transfer market. But do you think that he's the right man to lead us back close or to where we want to go?
I do for now. Yeah, right now I do. I think that based on the body of work that he's put in to this point, there's been enough progression in terms of the overall attitude within the squad, the feel good factor, the type of players he's trying to bring in. I think that things are moving in the right direction. I think when we'll really get a full picture, if this ever happens, is when Ole has the players that all the players that he wants to make a sufficient challenge at the top, at Liverpool and City, and then if he falls short, then I think it's fair to judge him on that. And I've said all along that I just don't think that, I know there's people out there calling for him to be sacked because they don't believe that he's the manager to take us to the top. Well, we just don't know yet. We just don't know. That's really, and until he's backed the way that he needs to be backed and the structure is in place to support him, those questions will remain unanswered.
Yeah, I guess the big worry is that we've had a bit of a history, haven't we, of the managers when they qualify for the Champions League, the board not really backing them in the same way as us as fans would like them to,
That's it.
and then when they miss out, then they throw the wallet at anything because they want to get back in the Champions League and make sure that Adidas cash and the Champions League riches come into the club. So that is the big worry, and it does remain this summer. I mean, we've only signed Donny van der Beek, which at the moment looks like a cracking signing, but it's strengthening possibly the area of the team where you'd say, look, we've got the best embarrassment of riches in terms of, you look at, if you're talking about players in the top players in the world, you're looking at the Brunos and your Pogbas. I mean, that's 2 out of your 3 midfield already. Who, Pogba's a world record, wasn't he? And Bruno has set the world on fire. So the big worry there is that we don't back him, and then we're forever in this limbo, aren't we? Where we don't really know. We never really know what would happen if they'd backed Van Gaal in the right year, or Mourinho in the right year, or Solskjaer, and we get back into the vicious cycle. So I hope that's not the case. We will touch on transfers in a sec. Just before we do, what would you regard out of the current squad as guaranteed starters? People who pretty much, if they're fit, play.
Sure. Well, I think certainly Martial has nailed down the number 9. I think that he, the improvement that we saw him last year and his movement off the ball in that position, his runs as a number 9, his hold up play, I think everything's improved. So I'd say certainly he's one of the first names on the team sheet. Rashford seems to have made, the wide left position his. So I think the front 3, depending if Sancho comes in or not, I think your front 3 is pretty much nailed on. Obviously Bruno sitting behind them is the number 10. I'll save my my other 2 midfielders just for a bit of suspense. But then if you look at the back 4, again, depending on what happens at left back, I think Luke Shaw, Maguire, Lindelof, and Wan-Bissaka would make up your back 4. I don't think much changes there. And then I think,
would you just, sorry to interject, would you have a Lindelof as a guaranteed starter still? I know there's some people have question marks over him, some people have question marks over Maguire. I don't personally over Maguire. Not so keen on them as a partnership possibly. Some people are big fans of Bailly, and some people want us to buy a new centre back. Would you regard Lindelof? Are you a fan of his particularly?
I mean, I think there's room for improvement certainly, and I think if we went out and bought an Upamecano or another center back that would come in, and then he loses his place for me. But I think in terms of what we have available to us, and certainly at the start of the season, Bailly's just coming back from injury. Jones has flown to the moon because no one's seen him, or who knows where he is. Smalling, the deal is United saying the deal is dead to Roma, but then there was a report yesterday saying that the Roma is still keen on signing him. So really, when you go down the list, Tuanzebe is still weeks away. You're looking at Mengi as Mengi didn't play in the under 23s.
He didn't.
No. So really,
and he has been training with the first this week, hasn't he?
Yeah.
So and Ole has been making noises in terms of comparing him to Matthias de Ligt, who of course captained Ajax at 18. So that's one that Ole is seemingly trying to groom.
Yeah, and so I just don't think. I think with what we have available, like right now, it has to be Lindelof, because I don't think you're going to parachute Mengi into what is, I guess you'd say an under fire back 4. I just hope. I'm thinking that maybe with Luke Shaw, I have a lot of time for Luke Shaw because I just feel he's the type of player, he's the character that he got slated under Mourinho, almost had a career-ending injury, and he's fought through all of that to come back. And now with the weight that he's lost, got himself fit. He looks like he's reinventing himself. It almost looks like Solskjaer's got a hold of him and said, "Look, we need more from you. We need you to get up and down the pitch better," because there was times last season where Maguire was really isolated if Shaw got forward, and I feel like maybe that's why Maguire struggled a little bit. It was because he does struggle in those one-on-one situations when he gets drawn out. We know that. And so hopefully with, those subtle changes with, maybe Luke Shaw being able to cover more ground, if you did bring in a left-footed center back, then you'd probably be able to shift Maguire to the inside right center back position, which maybe Wan-Bissaka would give him more of the cover that he needs, because we know that, you know, Wan-Bissaka's got one of the best recovery rates in the league. So, but in terms of the back four, I think that stays. And then when you get to the keeper position, I think it's De Gea's to lose right now, with Dean Henderson waiting in the wings.
Yes,
and
it's a weird old situation there, isn't it?
600K on goalkeepers, but
look, I mean, to start the season, of course, you would think it's going to be De Gea. I mean, Ole did come out after the Villa friendly and he was praising Henderson pretty highly, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Saying he looked like a Man United keeper. He commanded his box very well. And of course, some of the criticism of De Gea is his command of his box isn't great. So that was quite telling. Look, we've got the Palace game, of course, at the weekend, but we've actually got Luton next week in the Carabao Cup.
Yeah.
So you'd think we're going to see both of them play, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I would think
it's going to be a very, very interesting situation.
I think secretly, obviously, the board is hoping for, in terms of a cost perspective, they're hoping for Henderson. Well, when they signed Henderson, I'm sure they're hoping for Henderson to succeed. He's on 120K a week, but then the other issue is, how are you going to shift a player in De Gea that's making, I think he's on 375K a week? How are you going to be able to shift him in the close season?
Yeah, I mean, I said on the last pod, it's a situation that I'm a bit worried about. Personally, I know weeks ago we talked about, even last season, we talked about the fact that having two keepers on your books is going to be risky business.
Yeah.
In terms of just the added pressure. You've already got a monumental pressure on you as a United goalkeeper, and then you've got the added pressure knowing that one half mistake and you might be benched.
Yeah.
And that's one massive worry you've got. And like you say, they both want that first team spot. Yeah, it's something that, and the other thing is that if Dean Henderson actually took David De Gea's spot, it would mean De Gea's chucked a couple in, right?
Yeah.
It would mean we will have had to have some games where De Gea hasn't played well. So on the one hand, I want De Gea to finish this season as keeper and start next season as keeper, because it will mean he's had an absolutely outstanding season.
Yeah. But then Dean Henderson's going to want to go at the end of this season, you would think, if that happens.
Yeah, well, the other thing I'd just say is that the transfer window doesn't shut till the 5th of October.
Yeah.
So it's a possibility still that De Gea plays, Dean Henderson gets his full debut for United against Luton, and then we've only got another couple of games after that before you got the international break and the transfer window shuts as well. I think it's still a possibility that Henderson ends up going on loan. It's a possibility we give him a taste of first team action now, see him around the squad, and as long as nothing weird happens in the meantime, that he possibly could go out on loan as well, I think.
Do you think in terms of the keeper situation, though, do you think that part of the reason why they want Dean Henderson around is to really push De Gea? Because you never got the impression when De Gea was making mistakes that Romero was going to. And I've said this all along, is there's been ample opportunities for Solskjaer to put Romero in as the number one. It's just not going to happen for him. And so I think maybe subconsciously, or De Gea knows that. De Gea knows that. And you just wonder, I mean, he's a competitive fellow. Yeah, I get that. But you need competition within the team. And I don't know if he really felt that from Romero. And I just wonder if he'd benefit a lot more from having Dean Henderson around and training, knowing that, he's got someone behind him who's really going to push him for the number one.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's a few ways to look at it, right? There's, like you say, I mean, it would have been a perfect opportunity for Ole to drop David De Gea without even having to drop him for the semi-final of the Cup, right? Yeah, exactly. Romero played all the games, and he could have just kept Romero and said, no, I'm not dropping De Gea. I'm just playing Romero. Yeah. But De Gea would have got the message. Yeah. He went for De Gea. I wish he blooming hadn't now. But there's one thing. So you think, does Ole think you should back your keeper? There's the other thing where I know you're saying that De Gea hasn't had much competition, but it's quite rare for a keeper to have competition, right? Normally you just have your number one, and then you have a number two who's happy to be a number two and never actually challenges the number one. So that's the second thing. But the third thing, going back to your point, is that De Gea reacted fantastically, didn't he, when he first signed for United? Fergie took him out of the firing line, put Anders Lindegaard in there,
Yep.
and De Gea rose to that challenge.
Yep.
So he has got a history of reacting well when he's got another keeper pushing him. So I tell you what, it's a tricky scenario for Ole, and I hope he's ready for it because it's a blooming big test of him.
Well, this is going to be one of those sort of big tests that he's going to be judged on when people ask the question, is he ready to be United? Is the United manager that takes us to the next level? These are the kind of scenarios that you need to deal with, as is just to finish off my team, the midfield scenario.
Yes.
I think that, just to finish off the team sheet, that in those games where we were talking about earlier, where we're really going to be forced to break teams down and have some patience, and the goal may not come till, late in the second half, like we've seen teams that have come to Old Trafford in the past and really pack the back against us. I think that you can get away with playing Van de Beek and Pogba in the same team against those teams, because you don't need, you're talking against the top 5-6 teams in the league. It's really the teams that you need an all-out number 6. So maybe those are the games where Matic comes in against your Liverpool, against your City, against Chelsea, and maybe Van de Beek goes to the bench, and now you have a substitute late, in the second half, if you're chasing the game or whatever it is, that you can bring off an impact player that can come off the bench.
100%.
So I think that those two will play together, and I wouldn't be surprised if they play together, even if Pogba passes fit, which it sounds like he will. I know there was some concerns over the last week. Hopefully, if he passes fit to play against Palace, I mean, that's a perfect scenario where, if you watch the Villa game, with the amount of ground that Donny van de Beek can cover, he was a couple of brilliant chances that he created on the edge of the 18 against Villa, but then there was that chance late in the first half where it was from a deeper position just outside our box, where he played that sort of 40-yard raking pass to Dan James in behind. So I think he has the ability to influence the game higher up the pitch, where we want him operating with Bruno, and imagine Bruno and Donny and our front three. Just the movement is just going to be an absolute nightmare for defenses. But then I also think that he's going to help out sort of back in front of the back four with relieving pressure, because he's so good on the ball that he can help break us out quicker, and also handle the press when teams press. So I think those two can play in the same team together, and I think that Donny has enough. His footballing brain is so good that those two can operate as a pivot together and support each other. So
you made me smile when you mentioned Bruno and Donny and the front three all raiding a deep sitting team. I think those two are going to be a match made in heaven going forward. And I think you're right as well. I did chat to an Ajax podcaster a few weeks back when Donny signed about whether we could get away with playing Donny, Bruno and Pogba in the same team. And he echoed your thoughts. He said that against the lesser lights, it's definitely a go. And I think we saw that against Villa, didn't we? We saw maybe parts that you don't see when you don't watch Van de Beek week in, week out, where he offers himself so much, right? Yeah. He's offering himself to the centre-backs, to the full-backs, to the other midfielders. He's always there as an option. He's always passing and moving. Yeah. And I think Bruno's played a little bit deeper for Portugal in one or two of the last games as well. I think they're clever enough. And I think Pogba showed a bit more of a maturity sort of in terms of his positioning after the lockdown. I think sometimes he dropped too deep when he was in a 3, when Matic was in there as well, if I'm honest. But I think, and look, when people are camping, I think, what do you think for the Crystal Palace game? Do you think possibly it might be a little bit too early for Bruno? I mean, Bruno's a different kettle of fish, isn't he? He will be saying, I'm fit, don't worry about it, boss. But he only joined training, I believe, yesterday on the Tuesday. So it's a possibility. I don't know whether, and Pogba, of course, has been suffering. He had to quarantine for a couple of weeks as well. Yeah. Do you think it's possible that maybe a McTominay or a Matic partners, two of them, or do you think we're going to go big guns and go Pogba, Bruno, and Donny van de Beek?
Well, I think, I think Ole will probably play it cautious, and if Pogba isn't quite fit, you're right. Bruno has had a big week. I forgot about he was away for the birth of his child and
Yeah, the
has been
birth of his
training.
child, a
Yeah,
couple of
yeah,
internationals.
yeah. So
Yeah,
so it could be a case. Certainly, it could be a case where, but that's. I mean, when you bring in a player like Van de Beek that gives you the versatility, and I was saying it for weeks ahead of that transfer that for me the biggest, our biggest concern coming into the season was backup for Bruno, because if you look at the entire squad, the drop off from our number 10 position from Bruno to your next available option being Pereira, Lingard, or Mata was just too great, and
I couldn't agree more.
that's where we struggled. So I think with the versatility that Van de Beek gives you, being able to deploy it higher up the pitch or operate, we just talked about how much how much he offers himself and how he can play all over the place.
Yeah,
That just gives you the option of, right, so Bruno isn't fit. I don't have to force him into the team now, because I know that
yeah,
I've got a player, and that was on display against Villa, like I said, that I can play higher up the pitch and that is going to give me the same effect. So it certainly could be a case where Van de Beek is played in that number 10 position, and then you're right, maybe you go with a Matic and a Fred, or a Matic and a McTominay. I thought
yeah,
McTominay was great at this when Pogba was out at the start of last season, where we were
yeah,
really screaming for someone to link the play. I thought that was an area of his game that really improved, and he was the one that would sort of collect the ball from the back four and drive us forward, and he was doing a great job of that. And then all of a sudden, whether it was the pressure caught up to him of, we didn't reinforce the midfield obviously in the last close season, and his increased role, whether it was something that caught up to him, I don't know, but.
yeah. He seemed to go out of favour, didn't he, after lockdown? And this is what I'm saying with Ollie. There's periods of time where players just seem to go out of favour. But McTominay did play pretty well against Villa. I thought he linked up with Donny pretty
Yep.
well as well.
Yep.
But I do definitely agree with you in terms of Bruno needing a rest sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
and also just keeping those standards up. Bruno's an animal, and if Ollie's rested him, Bruno's going to take it as he's dropped me,
Yep.
and then he's going to come back in, and he's going to be even more. There's going to be even more fire in his belly, and then you've got that beautiful problem, I call it,
Yep.
when you don't know who to pick because they're both good, not not you don't know who to pick because they're both rubbish. So Donny, I've watched quite a lot, and I've asked a number of Ajax fans about him as well.
Mm-hmm.
And when he plays that, if you want to call it number 10 position that Bruno plays,
Mm-hmm.
he plays it quite similar to Bruno. You see him, he sometimes looks like a striker.
Mm-hmm.
So you do really have that perfect replacement for Bruno. They're different types of player,
Yep.
but they have got similarities in terms of positioning.
Mm-hmm.
You've also, like you say, you've got that versatility where if Bruno's our best player, isn't he, by
Yep.
all intents and purposes? And then you've got Donny who can slip in at number 8. You've got Donny who can play in a double pivot as well. And also,
Mm-hmm.
those games when it's 0-0 and we're really struggling,
Mm-hmm.
we really can send on the cavalry now.
Yep.
And you've got runs going on. You've got Bruno shooting from everywhere, picking out passes. And it's going to allow us to throw the kitchen sink. Because that's one thing at the end of last season when we were chasing a game and we didn't throw the kitchen sink. And it was so hard to watch as a United fan because we're so used
Mm-hmm.
to, in those last 10, 15, 20 minutes, just bombarding a goal until we do, in the end, get that equaliser or that winner. So I think that is going to be massively helpful. And it's, like I say, it's a beautiful problem, right?
Absolutely. I think after lockdown too, one of the things you saw was with the secret was sort of out about Bruno, and teams knew that if you got into Bruno and stopped him from playing, that was a way to stop United. So I think that when you play Van de Beek and Bruno together, it just gives teams an extra problem. And with those two operating
Yeah.
together, you can't cover, you can't mark everyone. And so,
No, you can't.
and so, it's just going to free up space. If all of a sudden you're dragging defenders out of position, it's just going to give people other areas of the pitch to get into and work. So I think that's where those two could really be effective together. And when Bruno isn't playing, like you said, they're similar players, but I think that Van de Beek's movement is just so good that
It is, isn't
he's going to find, even when he's being marked heavily, I just feel that he's going to be able to get himself a few yards of space and maybe cope a little bit better in terms of when I'm heavily marked, how am I going to free myself up to get myself into a position to make a killer
Yeah.
pass? So, and it's maybe that's something that Bruno is still sort of trying to figure out in the English league. How do I get myself free? And that's the next evolution sort of for Bruno.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and also another great thing that he'll bring to the midfield is to keep Pogba's standards up, and he will know he's got a battle on his hands as well.
Yeah.
And I think your Pogba, especially Pogba and Martial, I'd say they come alive that bit extra when they've got great players alongside them.
For
And I
sure.
think with all this, Donny is another player. He's like a real team player, isn't he? The way he wants to link up with people,
Yeah.
he wants to put people in space. He's not a very selfish player at all.
No.
Great character from the chats I've had with the Ajax bunch. And I think that's going to, again, bring another level out of Pogba and Martial. And I'm expecting an absolute blinder from Martial this season. And I think it might be a big one for Pogba too.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Yeah, so look, in terms of the Palace game, it's so hard to predict how we're going to line up. I know Tuanzebe is definitely out.
Yeah.
There's been some press reports that we're going to be missing 11 players. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Breaking news. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
No chance. They always want to be dramatic, but it will be. I would presume Ollie might put a couple of those players who've played internationals on the bench,
Yeah.
but I expect us to have a very, very strong side indeed. And I expect Donny van de Beek to start, I think, as well.
Yeah, I agree. The more I think about it, I think you're bang on with, I think Bruno and Pogba will probably start on the bench. And then if they're needed, like you said, that's imagine those two coming off the bench in the second half, sort of fresh with 30 minutes to play. That's what we need. That's what we've wanted. We needed that squad depth, right? So you're still going to have a player that can influence the game already out there for 60 minutes, or a chance to unlock the Palace defense. I mean, you presume that Palace is going to come and sit deep again. So having those two come off the bench in the second half, just
edge of the seat stuff, isn't it? It's one of those ones where you're thinking, God, this is a long day, and then you see those two, and the numbers go up, and you're up. You're right. Here we go. So, looking forward to that 100%. Look, we're obviously a couple of very positive United fans in general. We'll have to look at the transfer window now. I know it hasn't really gone the way we might have expected. We've touched on Donny van de Beek already, and just the change, you're right. It's lovely to have that addition to the squad. Even back in the day when we're winning titles, we'd strengthened from a position of power. Look, we were thinking that Sergio Reguilón might be coming in the next day or two. It looked like it was going over the line. It seems that Spurs have gazumped us to that one. What I'm hearing is it's a situation where we were willing to pay the full 30 million euros, but we wanted to do a 25 plus 5 or a 20 plus 10 in add-ons.
Yeah.
We also were not happy to do the deal that actually it seems that Spurs have done, which is sign him for 30 million euros. If Real Madrid want him back after 1 year, they pay 35 and they get him no questions answered. If they want him after 2 years, they pay 40 million, giving Spurs a 10 profit and no questions answered as well. What I will say, there's also a 5 million euros add-ons that Spurs could pay as well. So after that first year, if Real do want him back, there's not much profit at all. Look, I started off this saga with Reguilón saying, I don't want a buyback clause. I'm not interested in that. We're United, blah, blah, blah. I then questioned myself and asked, am I just stuck in the dark ages? And you look at Bayern Munich and what did they have? Perisic and Coutinho on loan this season, and they romp to glory. And am I stuck in the dark ages? Now it looks that Spurs have agreed to those terms. Right. You see a lot of United fans saying we shouldn't have agreed. Where do you stand? What camp do you stand in on that particular one in terms of a buyback clause from a club like Real Madrid? Where do you stand?
Well, look, I agree. I absolutely agree with you and with United on this one in terms of I wouldn't have agreed to the buyback clause.
Yeah.
Where I have a problem with things is if United were going in for this player, he's 23, he's a Spanish international. Buyback clauses for young players that teams initially wanted that buyback clause. It's common, right? We hear about it all the time. There's a way to get around the buyback clause, and that is to but essentially, if I think for United, it was reported they were looking for a 35 million buyback clause. You can offer them the value of the buyback clause, or offer them 40 million if you want,
Yeah,
to give them their valuation of what the buyback would be for that player.
of
And
course.
so that's a chance to negotiate that out of the contract. To then go in with a 27, I think it was 27 million that we bid. So you're under the valuation,
Yeah,
and you don't want to include the buyback clause, is just a completely naive way of negotiating, and just it just feeds into the overall philosophy that our transfer strategy and the way we go about doing business is just absolutely, it's mind-boggling.
it
Um,
does seem a mess, doesn't it?
and so that was the biggest thing for me, is just, look, yeah, I mean, if you would have gone into these negotiations knowing that they would have wanted this buyback clause included, which is, if I was Real Madrid, I would have included it as well. He's the third choice center back there, but right now, but in a few years, 2 years at United, chance to develop. Why wouldn't we want him back? Negotiate to get the clause taken out. Realistically, don't go in with a low ball bid and expect them to remove the clause. So that was my biggest gripe in
Yeah.
terms of how we went about this whole deal.
I agree with that. I mean, if it does go through with Spurs, Real have got a fantastic deal out of that. They let their
Absolutely.
left back go, their reserve left back, as you like, go on loan effectively, and Spurs look after him. They pay his wages. You can watch him, see if he develops into what you think he'll develop into. After a year, you pay a few extra million. After 2 years, you pay an extra, around 10
Yep.
million. And if he doesn't set the world on alight, you just leave him there and you say thank you very much.
That's it.
So it is a fantastic deal. The only thing I'd say, Tim, is that I really like him as a player,
Mm-hmm.
and I think he's exactly what we need
Mm-hmm.
as a left back. I wouldn't say option. I'd say horses for courses. You've got Luke Shaw there, who links up great. He brings the best, I think, out of Rashford.
Mm-hmm.
He provides more cover than Brandon Williams does in terms of defence. But Reguilón is a proper attacking box-to-box left back who just seems to pick the right crosses. He can cross from deep and get to the byline.
Mm-hmm.
He is exactly the type of left back I would like to have come in. So when I said it's immediately after the Sevilla game. Before the game, I highlighted the Sevilla fullbacks as threats.
Mm-hmm.
And afterwards, I said, look, is Reguilón someone we might look at
Yep.
in terms of a transfer? And then when the interest came up, I was licking my lips and thinking, this is beautiful. This is a great option. I do agree in terms of the buyback clause, but I also agree with you that I think clubs have got a bit wise to our nonsense in the transfer market.
Yep.
And that, I mean, we all know it as humans, just take football out of it. If you're saying a certain price and these are conditions, and someone comes in and offers you something, you take it as an offence, don't you? You're like, well, what are you talking about, mate? I just told you what the price was, and I told you the conditions, and
Yeah.
you're saying, no, I don't want the conditions, and I want to pay less.
Yep. Exactly.
It's a very good way to annoy the club you're trying to buy off. So, yeah, I am disappointed if he does go to Spurs,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't know if Real were holding out and just saying no. Although the whispers seem to be that if we had done what you said and maybe offered a little bit more and taken a proper, going all in on him,
Mm-hmm.
then we might have been able to get him.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. The point you made there is just bang on about the way we're doing business with these clubs. We're just turning so many clubs off with dealing with us, and Dortmund's the same way. Like, there's no way that we should be haggling over this. Apparently we had a fee agreed with Dortmund, and then Ed went back and tried to negotiate a lower fee.
Yeah.
Just like, why are we have a club in Dortmund that is developing these good young players, a club that we probably want to go to again, maybe in next year, and trigger Holland's buyout clause. Why are we doing business this way? Why are we turning off clubs with dealing with this? It never used to be that way.
Yeah, well, with Haaland, it wouldn't be a problem, right? We just trigger the buyout
Yeah.
clause and then that's it.
Yeah.
Although the big problem there is that Haaland's already turned us down and gone to Dortmund.
Mm-hmm.
You got Bellingham's gone to Dortmund as well.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you're right. I mean, one problem possibly, and I don't know this for a fact in terms of whether it affected this transfer, but I did hear the rumours that we had gone in, agreed something, and then Ed had returned
Yeah.
with a different sort of structure. Though the one thing that could possibly be is that the structure has been for quite a while now that it goes to Ed. Matt Judge does the dealings. It goes to Ed, and then Ed takes it to Joel Glazer, and then Joel Glazer does his due diligence, whatever that might entail.
Yes.
And then he says yes or no. And it could have been that we got something sorted. We went to the very top,
Yep.
and it came back and said, no, well, hang about. Can you not sort this out? And then, and this is the big problem, right?
Yep.
I'm not, it's that structure. That structure is from the outside thinking, if you've got all those people it has to go through, it's a mess, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got Ollie going up to Judge, going up to Woodward, going up to Glazer, and then it all filtering back down. It's going to take long, which I think is why these transfers drag out and why we do become a little bit of a laughing stock in the press and with other fans with our sort of bumbling deals. But also in terms of communication, it's not as clear as it possibly should be, where, say, if you have a director of football in there, they have the license to basically, look, they've got the budget, they've got the license, and they pretty much say, look, can I push the trigger on this? And the answer is pretty much always yes, because they've built that structure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so
it's a massive problem. Joel Glazer calling the shots here from Florida. First of all, obviously logistically, just think about it. Like you talked about the time difference, first of all. So there's a 5-hour time difference. So, you're going, it's a transatlantic sort of message to try to figure out. And on top of that, I mean, if there's any rumors to the truth that Joel Glazer thought that 50 million was too much for Bruno and wanted to go back to Sporting to try to get that deal lowered, it just shows you how out of touch he is in terms of the footballing side of things. I mean, he's running the Tampa Bay Buccaneers over here. He's sort of overseeing that, and they're undergoing a major overhaul to make a push for a Super Bowl. They've brought in Tom Brady and some other high profile names, and have paid massive amounts of money to bring them in. So, how that's really his sort of baby, if you will. And I just don't know. Like, obviously, he's just not qualified to be making these decisions. And like you touched on, the director of football is your player that would.
I know. I mean, it's a tricky one. I know he is one of the only Glazers who does show an active interest in the club, right? Yeah. He wants to be hands-on in the club. It does always make me laugh, though. I know you talked about the transatlantic thing there, and you are probably right. But I always think, like, say, for instance, when they say, oh, well, Woodward's on holiday for a couple of weeks, so nothing's going to get done. Yeah. And I always think, what are you talking about? If I was making decisions at that level, you call me at 4 a.m. I've got a back phone, and I know if that's ringing, then it's emergency. I call it and I say, right, okay, let's start business now. If the transfer window's open, and I'm the CEO of a football club, I'm not on holiday. Yeah. I don't have a holiday. Yeah. I have a holiday at a different time of the year. It's just, for me, it always boggles my mind when. But I think you're right. I think that it does delay it. Well, and then we don't know. I mean, what kind of due diligence would Joel Glazer be doing? It's like asking someone to do due diligence on a subject that they are not an absolute expert in. I mean, what even is that?
I mean, as much as you say that, like, don't forget the Glazers have so many other interests. They've got all the real estate interests over here as well. Of course. They've just taken out like a $1 million PPP loan over here to help pay for all the salaries that they've had to go to the government to get. Like, they've got all these other things in the fire that they're dealing with, especially through COVID, that, I know what you're saying in terms of, they should be on point with, if something happens, you need to call me. But, like, I mean, I just get the sense that the Glazers are more the type of the people that would say, right, I'm off the clock for 5 or 6 hours now because I've got to do this. Yeah. Call me,
You know what? You've hit the nail on the head. And that is the problem we've got, isn't it? That I'm thinking about like a fan. Yeah. I'm thinking with United above everything. About every business, about my sleep, about anything. Yeah. And whereas, of course, that is not the case, because, if we were running the club at the moment, we wouldn't be taking dividends out. We'd be pumping everything in. Yes. And also, the real sad thing of the whole Glazer saga for me is that the naivety from them in terms of not realising that an absolutely powerful and strong United team that is winning trophies all the time would make them even more cash. Mm-hmm. You look at these sponsorship deals we've got. in these last few years,
Mhm.
and we haven't been pulling up trees in terms of performances on the field at all.
Mhm.
You look, young fans these days, they don't necessarily support the clubs that their fathers did, like we did when we were younger. It was that, tradition, it gets handed down.
Mhm.
Kids these days go, oh well, who does Aguero play for? Who does this guy play for? Oh, I support Barcelona, even though I live in, even though I'm an English guy.
Mhm.
It's a lot different. And in terms of, even if they only cared about the cash,
Mhm.
they should still do it our way. They should still want to push money into the team, because ultimately, when the team does well, you make way more cash.
Well, that's it. The Glazers, first of all, the Glazers are in this. Let's be clear. They're the way they measure success is by profit. They don't measure success by what happens in the pitch. In a profitable season, that's why we see United qualify for the Champions League, and then once they've got their 100 million,
Yeah,
that they get for qualification, they don't reinvest that, and that's what we're seeing. And then that's been a trait for them. The second
I
thing,
know.
the second thing is you're absolutely right, and the commercial success. We talked to Kieran Maguire, the author of The Price of Football, a few weeks ago. And over the last 5 years, United has sort of hovered around, leveled off and plateaued at about 274 or 75 million pounds in terms of what they're getting from their various corporate sponsorships.
Yes.
Prior to that, it was in excess of 400 million. So they are certainly paying a price for the lack of success.
Yeah.
But
And you look at the teams who I know they come out and say, look, that's another record year of sponsorship, it's another record year of revenue.
yeah,
But if you look at it equivalently to the other teams in the world and the other teams in the league, it's quite obvious. Liverpool and City are now worth a hell of a lot more
yeah,
than they were 5 years ago, and
absolutely.
there's only one reason for that.
Yeah, for its success.
Yeah,
But I think when you're in terms of the owners of the Glazers, if they're still taking out their dividend and they're making their profit, they couldn't be bothered. So,
yeah,
and that's the
I
problem.
know.
It's gone from a football club to a business, and I think that's the biggest gripe with the supporters is, it's a football club. Money goes into the club after your operating expenses. That money is reinvested in the club, and that's how the club should operate. And then you've got owners who are coming and investing their own money. So,
Yeah, and the problem is it's very hard to see a way out, isn't it?
yeah,
It's almost like we have to live with them and do the best we can and hope for the best we can,
that's it.
like we did in the Fergie years. I wish I had 5 billion quid burning a hole in my pocket,
Me
because
too,
don't
mate.
worry, just like every United fan, we wish, but hopefully we'll find a way out of it, and hopefully this summer they do realise that success for the club means even more cash in their pockets, so everyone's happy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
always
so
the
look,
hope.
the Sancho thing does rumble on. He did play and score in the German Cup
Yeah.
on Monday. Look, on one hand, it is rumbled on too far. On the other hand, we've only got 4 games before the window shuts. We got Palace, we got Luton in the Carabao, we got Brighton away, and then we've also got Spurs as well. So we got 3 Premier League games. It's a possibility they're thinking, look, we can afford, we can win those games without him,
Hmm.
but it's not a road I want to be going down. I'd love that to be sorted out ASAP, because I don't think we should be risking dropping points. And you look at all the players we have got out and who have just returned to training, and it would, if we had assigned Sancho, he had a full pre-season, didn't he?
Hmm.
And he played internationals as well, so he would have started, you would have thought, against Palace.
Yeah.
So are you still hopeful that we will get, oh, I mean, of course you're hopeful.
Yeah.
Do you think we will get Sancho in? I'll ask that question.
Well, I'll tell you what. Last Sunday, I was a lot more confident, and I was on a show, and I said we're going to get him. After what's taken place over the last few days, um, obviously with him playing that game, it meant that he wasn't coming in before the start of the season. But there was a good chance, obviously, that it wasn't going to happen. I'm not so sure now. I'm not as confident. I think that it probably still gets over the line.
Good.
I just feel that, like, this, if you coming into this close season, I sort of was on record as saying that I thought that this is probably the Glazers' most important transfer window in terms of what took place to get to this point with, United legend coming in, the
Yeah.
feel good factor around the club being back, the progress that was being made. If there was ever a time to back a manager since Ferguson left, this was it. And it's a player that they've been chasing for a year. Solskjaer has been very adamant that he's their top target. It's publicly known that he's communicated that to the Glazers and to Woodward. And we're in a scenario where there's literally no competition for us to sign this player. This deal should have been wrapped up weeks ago. United aren't battling with anybody. We know what happens when United get into a battle with other big clubs. We lose out. And so when you go into next season and you haven't signed them, and obviously, of course, Real Madrid were like, United, why don't you take Gareth Bale? That just opens, you take Gareth Bale, skip out on Sancho this summer, and then next summer we'll go in and get him.
Well, yeah, and the other problem is that Barcelona quite possibly will lose Messi next summer, right? His contract will officially run out then.
Absolutely.
And then they come in, and then potentially PSG lose Mbappe, and then potentially thereafter Salah or Mane.
Yep.
And before you know it, Liverpool are then in the race for Sancho. I know I chatted to someone who's quite close to Sancho, and he said that Nike were actually trying to push the Sancho to Liverpool deal.
Yeah.
But Liverpool didn't have the cash at the time. So, yeah, it just seems, for all the points you mentioned, but also this summer was the summer I thought we've got the power in terms of the different revenue streams that I said it on a show I was on the TV, that we and Chelsea are going to be the ones that are the big hitters in the transfer window this season. I got 1 out of 2, but it wasn't the one I wanted. And as it happens now, you got Spurs look like they're getting Reguilón. They might be getting Bale on loan. You can think what you like about him, but he's certainly someone who could change Spurs' outlook, and alongside Kane and Son, push them for those Champions League spots. You've got Everton signing all kinds of players. They've got Ancelotti as their blooming boss, for God's sake.
Yep.
Arsenal have re-signed Aubameyang and strengthened a little bit too. Chelsea have gone wild.
Yep.
And so when in the summer where I thought we would be looking up to try and catch City and Liverpool, we're actually looking behind us and saying, hang about, the cavalry are coming and we got to do something about it.
Well, that's the massive problem, isn't it? Everybody around us is strengthened, and Arteta, like you touched on Arsenal, they've signed players. They've now won the FA Cup and the Community Shield, and we know how important that first bit of silverware is to spur teams on. So
important.
He's got them pulling in the right direction. So people laughed at me sort of a week or two ago when I said that if as things stood, that I thought we'd be battling Arsenal for 4th place. I think Arsenal has massively caught us up in terms of, with the two standards of play for both teams. But you're absolutely right. And that's what's made this sort of transfer window so frustrating, is that you see what's going on around you. If you we should have been strengthening and backing Solskjaer anyway. But in terms of what's gone on around us now, if that hasn't spurred you on to say, hold on a minute, these teams are gunning for us. Chelsea is, with the signings they've made, they're ahead of us. Like I said, we touched on Everton. Wolves did all their business in January. So, but that's another team that, is certainly, we saw what they were capable of last season, and they've certainly put in some good performances against us. So it's just, that's the most frustrating bit. And it's the whole structure and strategy that we sort of just talked about is, one of our right wing options is Perisic, a player that, two transfer windows ago when Marino wanted him, it was deemed wasn't worth the extra 2 or 3 million. But now a couple seasons later, we're going to go back in for him. Like, it just, there's no structure. There's no, strategy coming into these windows. And that's the biggest problem. And that's what I said on Twitter today was, I don't care about how much money the Glazers have, you can look at what they've spent. Maybe I think it's over 200 million over the last 18 months. But in terms of going back throughout their history, it's more than just money how you back a manager. You back a manager with the structure and the support around them. When you look at Liverpool and you look at Mo Salah, he wasn't Klopp's first choice. It was Michael Edwards, the director of football, who convinced Klopp that he was the best player to fit into their system, and said, hang on a second, have you actually sat down and looked at what Mo Salah can do for us? that's the kind of support that you provide to a manager, and you go out and you recruit those players and bring them in. And that's just completely missing at United.
You're right. Yeah. I mean, one thing I always touch on is that we seem to do every transfer window one too late. Harry Maguire Mourinho wanted him, didn't he?
Yeah.
And then we
Yeah.
got him the next year.
Yep.
Bruno, I was going mad on transfer deadline day last year. I was on the pod. I was saying, why haven't we gone and got Bruno Fernandes? It's ridiculous. And then in January, we signed Bruno. I also said at the end of that transfer window, why haven't we got a striker in? We've let all these goals go out of the team. Yeah, sure, it wasn't the right fit with Lukaku and Sanchez. We've let those. We weren't losing any goals with Sanchez, were we?
No.
We let them go out of the team, and we didn't replace them. And then come the end of January, we're getting Ighalo and Bruno in, and it's months too late.
Yeah.
And the other thing, back Ole, but back the club as well.
Yeah.
If we sign Sancho this year, whatever happened to Ole, and whatever happens, that player is a player who is going to be worth something in terms of on the pitch, in terms of marketing, in terms of if he wanted to go, would get a massive fee for him back. There's back the club as well as the manager. And that's what you see other clubs doing, especially like Chelsea, for instance. Lampard, it could all go pear-shaped for Lampard. It really could. He's pear-shaped anyway, isn't he? But, but it could go pear-shaped because...
Yeah.
And if it does, what happens is another manager comes in to a team that he can say, okay, well, Lampard was doing this, this, and this wrong, but I've got a really, really strong team here. So
that's it.
I mean, one thing I'd say is that we've got Pogba now and we got Bruno now, which those are two midfielders who last season we didn't really have, right? Bruno at the end and Pogba at the end, but before then, Pogba was injured or off on his travels, and Bruno was not there either. So we've also got Donny van der Beek. So in terms of strengthening from last season, I think we are, of course, stronger.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I just always want United to do the very, very best we can to do the very best we can. And it just seemed like a summer that we could have gone and really made a statement. We might do yet, but it seems there for the taking for this team to really give it a real go. Like you say, test Ollie's mettle, say, look, there you go. There are the players. You've changed the culture of the club.
That's it.
You've done great things, but can you deal with all these world-class players and top-class players and take us to this next level that we want to get to?
Because that's a fair indictment of a manager. If you back a manager like Lampard's been backed at Chelsea, it's realistic at the end of this season. If there's a failure at Chelsea, and let's be honest, with the signings they've made, Chelsea should be challenging Manchester City at least for second. With Liverpool, we've seen some issues, some cracks sort of appear, and they don't have the money to strengthen the way they want to. They should possibly even be challenging Liverpool. So I think that at the end of the season, if Lampard is, finished outside of the top four, or expectations have probably been set for him as a manager already, it's realistic to say, all right, Frank, we backed you. I'm sorry, but it just wasn't good enough.
And Lampard would have to hold his hands up and say fair play.
Absolutely.
Whereas in Ollie's situation, he might turn around and say, well, actually, you haven't backed me.
Yeah.
And I did. I hit the targets you set me.
Yeah.
I kept my job, and then you didn't give me the tools to push on.
Yeah.
Look, Tim, I'm gonna get your predictions for the end of the season before we wrap it up, but I'll just touch on we're following the academy and the women and all the other teams this season quite clearly. So the under-23s actually lost, unfortunately, to Leicester 2-0. They're in a little bit of a situation this season, the 23s. It was only Luca Ercolani who played, who was actually 20 years of age. Everyone else was a teenager. So we lack those players between 20 and 23 who would obviously play in the under-23s.
Right.
And Leicester were quite a physical opposition. As you mentioned earlier, Teden Mengi is with the first 11.
Yep.
We've got already Dylan Levitt actually made his debut for Charlton. They lost to West Ham, but he played 90 minutes. So it's great to see him playing against men. It's going to be a good test for him this season. Look, we had Galbraith, Garner and Hannibal in that midfield. They are all pretty young. James Garner is looking like he needs a loan.
Yeah.
He is a player who was torn up the reserves. We saw it with Pogba right back in the day
Yeah.
when he was tearing up the reserves, and you need that first team football to really push on. So
Absolutely.
I expect James Garner. I've got big hopes for the lad. I expect him to go out on loan. Possibly Ollie's holding him back to give him a game next week against Luton, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
and then secure the loan. I'd quite like to see that from some of the younger players.
Mm-hmm.
Look, it was first half we finished goalless. Leicester did hit the woodwork twice in the first 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
The end of the half, Anthony Elanga had a big chance, saved on the line by the keeper. Another big chance straight after back of the keeper, saved off the line, cleared off the line by a defender this time.
Mm-hmm.
I think the lack of striker in that team is showing a little bit. And we did see Shola Shortire, the little rising star, 16-year-old, make his debut as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it was second half goals from Ali Regba and Mitchell Clark that downed us. Lucky sort of rebound really off Dishon Bernard, putting Regba through, and then Mitchell Clark with a long ranger. The only thing I'd say, and I've always got red tinted specs on, as any listener will know, is that both of those guys could have been sent off. There was a horrible studs up challenge from Regba, and Mitchell Clark pushed Hannibal over. Hannibal doesn't seem to go a game without getting in a blooming tussle, which I particularly like. So it's going to be a tricky season back in the top level of the Premier League too.
Yeah.
For the 23s, with I think some players outgrowing and having to go on loan.
Yeah.
What about yourself, Tim? Do you have anyone down there you've got your eye on? I know we've been raving about Hannibal quite a lot recently.
Yeah, certainly.
Is there anyone that you particularly fancy from the academy?
Well, obviously, yeah, we've touched on Mengi, but Ethan Laird's probably another player in terms of,
Yeah, he was out from injury, by the way, guys.
Yeah.
If you missed it,
so he's probably another one to keep an eye on. But you're right. Yeah, there's a bit of a disconnect, isn't there, right now in terms of sort of players that would all the players. You're right that have really come through need to be given a loan spell. Jimmy Garner, I think what I read yesterday was that Coventry City and Huddersfield were in for him, but doesn't look like those loan deals are going to happen. He's going to go, like you said. That's especially now that we've sort of strengthened the midfield area. He needs to go on a loan spell and
he does
and gain experience. But yeah, there's not really nobody that really sort of comes to mind that I would say is ready to step in sort of this season and make an impact. I think that Mengi will be sort of introduced here and there, particularly with our the center back issues we're having at the moment. I think there's going to be opportunities for him, but you just want to caution with how much you deploy him, because I think we saw with Brandon Williams towards the end of last season was that to bring a player in and sort of rely on him a bit heavily at that age is a bit of a problem.
You're right. At first team level, there's such a high level of video analysis now as well. So you might have a little couple of chinks in your armor, as you'd expect from a young player.
Yeah.
And for the first few games, you're doing brilliantly. You look like you're a world beater, ready made.
Yeah.
And then people start seeing, and these guys, that's what they're paid to do, just analyze video non-stop all day.
Yeah.
And you just see a little thing that would be ironed out within a year or two. He's 18 years old as a centre-back, for God's sake.
Mm-hmm.
But then that starts getting exposed. And, I think Brandon Williams might have suffered from that a little bit. But yeah, you're right. There doesn't seem to be anyone ready-made. They look like they're ready to go on loan.
Yeah.
I'd love to see Hannibal get a few minutes, possibly in the Carabao. But yeah, they're either ready to go on loan or a little bit too young, I think.
The thing with Hannibal is, I mean, Neil Wood was commenting on the other day and saying how much of a brilliant player he is, but it's just that he said there's so much for him to learn. So yeah, maybe in those those games, there's massive expectations on him, certainly. And you're right, you just need to sort of pick and choose what games, maybe a low key Carabao Cup game, to help blood him. But look, as I'm sure you are, a massive fan of players going on loan, particularly the Championship. It's such a difficult league. It's physical. You look at the difference that it made for Axel Twanzebe when he went to Villa, and sort of, going from being involved in a relegation battle to, I think they won promotion that year, and the maturity and the not only the maturity in his physical play. But when he was coming in at the start of the season last season, and when things were going pear-shaped, but his performances were really, 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 really good, and the standard didn't drop for him personally. I think you put that down to, being involved in that, slogging it out in the championship, in that relegation battle, and the amount that develops your character. I think that's really where we all know that Jimmy Garner has the technical ability to play, but it's, can you do it week in and week out? When things get hard, how do you react? That's it's a massive jump from Premier League 2 to the Premier League, as you said. So
yeah, I think you're spot on as well. I think it's as well, when you're at such a behemoth of a club like United,
yeah,
to take away all those trimmings, to take away all that comfort. They've been there, they've come through the system.
yeah,
You take away, that wonderful training ground, all the rest, and you go down, and you basically got to earn your stripes again against guys you probably think you're better than.
yep.
And you're right, it can be the making of a man. I know the keepers now, Kovar and Pereira, are also going to be missing because they're down there. But you even look back to the 90s. Look, David Beckham went away to Preston North End, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I believe, did he play alongside Moisey? I think he did.
I think he did, yeah.
I think he played alongside
I think he did.
Our old mate David Moyes. But it's a test in terms of, it's a real sink or swim situation. You probably think, oh, I'm above this. But if you can perform at that level and come back a little bit tougher, and also appreciate what you've got at United, then it can propel you. But we've also seen players go out and kind of disappear, right? Not play too many games. So I'm hoping Levitt, especially Garner, I love as a player. I hope they can do it. And I hope also we sign a striker for the 23s. So Alanga's not doing it all, and Helm are doing it all themselves, because they do lack that focal point. And I'd hate to see those players who are developing kind of suffer a season where they take quite a few losses because we don't have the strength, because we're being honest to the players and saying, you need to go on loan. That's more important than us, doing well in the Premier League too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right, mate, before we wrap it up, I'm going to have to ask you your predictions for your next season. So go on, give me where we're going to finish in the Premier League, FA Cup, Carabao Cup and Champions League.
Well, okay. It's a tough one based on not knowing sort of where we're going to end.
It's a horrible question. I know that.
No, in terms of the transfer window, but it's a necessary one because the season's already started. So I think that we will finish top 4. I think that we'll probably, as things stand, that we're probably good enough to finish 4th. If we still strengthen in the transfer window, then I think we'll finish 3rd again. In terms of the FA Cup, this is where
just quickly. So sure. You think we'll finish 3rd?
Finish third in the league. I think in the FA Cup.
Would you be happy with that, finishing 3rd? Do we have to increase the points tally? I know you said it's not necessarily that important. Because of course, look, we're looking at 2 clubs above us who finished quite far ahead of us. If we finish 3rd with 66 points again, would you be happy with that, or are there caveats in there?
Well, so you're going to have to increase the points total because the other teams around us have improved. So their point, like Chelsea's not going to finish on 66 points again. That's just not going to happen. And then you look at the teams around us that have strengthened. Like I touched on earlier, Arsenal's going to catch us up. Wolves are going to be there, and they're going to be battling sort of for that top 6 probably, and possibly, depending on how well their season goes, top 4. Everton's improved with the midfield 3 of Allen, Pamej, and Decore. So the points total is going to have to improve, and that's where I think it's going to bleed into the other competitions, because we're not going to have this squad depth as things finish the way they are to be able to compete on all fronts. So I think that's where you'll see us suffer in the Champions League, the FA Cup, and I think we'll make it out of the group stage in the FA Cup or in the Champions League if we get a fairly good draw. But also in those Champions League games, you're going to have times when we've got to travel to some countries and then play at the weekend, and we know how grueling those sort of midweek European,
and it's going to be even worse this season as well. We're packing a season into a shorter season, so it's going to be even less turnaround time. You're right.
So I think we suffer in all the other competitions, and I think that, you know, I don't think that I can't, with what we have right now, unless we get some big performances from some of our sort of fringe players, I can't see us winning a trophy, to be honest.
No. Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
look, so then Ollie finishes third,
Yeah.
and you're saying we probably wouldn't get to the semis in all the cup competitions like we
Yeah.
did last year,
Yeah.
and people are going to say, well, where's the progression?
Yeah.
So it's a very, very tricky one. I hope we back him and get a few more signings in so we can really see where we're at, if you like. Look, Tim, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Just let everyone know where we can find you. I know you run the
Sure.
Supporters Club. I know you do events as well.
Yeah.
You've got Twitter, Instagram.
Yeah.
Just let us know, first of all, about the Supporters Club and possibly where they can meet up if, for instance, they're on holiday in that area or if they live in
Absolutely.
the area. Let
Yeah.
us know.
Yeah, it's so we just started getting together last year. We formed a supporters club here in Niagara, Niagara MUFC. We meet at Doc McGilligan's, which is a Irish pub right in the heart of Niagara Falls. And our goal long term is to become an official supporters club, so we can sort of, you know, obtain the benefits that goes along with that. You're right. We are trying to obviously we get together on match days, but we're looking at sort of trying to set up some events with other supporters clubs in the area and maybe try to bring over some ex-players for some events.
Superb.
And yeah, so it's Doc McGilligan's. And if you are in Niagara, certainly our following and our club is increasing week to week. We get more and more people coming out. And yeah, one of the benefits living in Niagara, obviously, is we're a massive tourist destination. And so, yeah, if you're on holiday over here and you're scrambling, trying to find a pub to find somewhere to watch a game, we'd love to have you come out and watch with some like-minded Reds.
Do you just rock up? Do you just rock up at the pub, or
Yeah.
do you have to get in touch with you first?
No, just come in. When you come to the pub, there's like a back sort of area that we have on match days, which is nice, that we've sort of set up. We've got a big screen back there, and the pub's great. They put it on. You can, if you find us on social media, so Niagara MUFC across all social media platforms, certainly get in touch before if you want, and it's to sort of, you know, give you some more details. But yeah, just rock up and come find us. The pub you can also find too. We also link our social media accounts to them, so if you can check them out if you want to find out exactly where they're located. They've been very good to us, and yeah, that's exactly what we're in for. He touched on is we'd love to have people from all around the world. That's the best part about United, is meeting people all around the world. So
Fantastic. Is it early jobby for you? A 12:30 kickoff. What time would that be in Niagara?
Well, so 12:30 kickoff is 7:30. So, you know, sometimes the crowd isn't as intense as it is for some of the later kickoffs. But this week the game is at 12:30, which is that's perfect. We'll roll in for a couple pints, I'm sure. And
Yes, I've actually had a few days indeed at pubs in the States. I was in the States for a little while on and off, so I had a few early kickoffs, and I used to go down to one particular pub where there was a good old crowd. We were having a good old sing song. I put a bit of fire into the place. Started getting songs sung and whatnot. But I must say, Tim, it does. If you're on normal time, you know, and if say United play at 5:30 and they lose, then, you know, half your weekend's ruined, right?
yeah,
But
exactly.
if you're up at 6:30 on a Saturday and you lose, it destroys your weekend, doesn't it?
Oh, because then, yeah, absolutely. Because the game's 7:30, so the game finishes at 9:30. We've lost, and then by that time, of course, you know, I have a family over here, and they want to start the day, and I'm in a bad mood because we've lost, and
Yeah,
you know,
just want to go back to sleep.
I just want to go back to bed. Can I just go back to bed? Oh, we got to make breakfast. Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah, so you get a good bunch going down there. It is quite cool, isn't it? If you can't be at Old Trafford, then it's kind of the next best thing, being surrounded by a group of mad Reds and all having a little sing-song and a chat about the game.
It's great, yeah. And our group, we have people sort of expats from the UK.
Yeah.
My dad is from Altrincham. My grandfather lived on Warwick Road, so which is a reason why we sort of support United. So so we get a good cross section of people. We've got people from all over the world, people from India, people from the UK, people from South America, that are United fans that come out. So it's really, it's such a good cross section of people. And yeah, it's great to be together on match days, and it sure beats sitting at home sort of by yourself watching the game. So.
Fantastic stuff. Well, listen, when I post this all on our social medias, I will pop up those links as well, guys. So if you are on holiday in the area, if you do live in the area, also get in touch with Tim, because the more members they get, the closer they can become to being a full supporters club. And then you've got ex-Reds visiting, you know, you get your opening ceremony and stuff like that as well, don't you? So certainly I will do the links for that. And you are at Niagara Red on Twitter and Instagram?
Yeah, my personal account, is at Niagara Red. So you can sort of, and I have a couple other projects that I have on the go as well, that you can follow if you'd like. I've got a sort of a retrospective coming out, or a United historical podcast where we really look at linking the past to the present with longtime Red Pete Molyneux, author of Tara Fergie. So we're working on that. That'll be a good one.
I would just interject there. You know, we at the end of the pod, normally my co-host Scott's on here. When we sign off, he always says "Tara" at the end, which is actually a nod to that banner. People who don't know, there was 3 years and it's still crap. Tara Fergie, I believe, was the banner. Yeah. Right back in the day when there was a few knives out for Sir Alex Ferguson, or Alex Ferguson as he was back then, and he made another banner, didn't he? I think 23 years later, and we're still on top.
And actually, his book that he wrote was good, because he always had the idea. He was telling me of writing the book sort of the year that Ferguson retired, and his book Tara Fergie was written in the year that Fergie retired, as sort of a goodbye to Fergie. So it's a good read. If you haven't read it, people should check it out, and certainly tune in. He's got some great stories. I was talking to him briefly about the project, and home and away, supported United, and it's going to be good. We're going to look at fan culture and all kinds of stuff, and songs and everything that goes around supporting United. So it'll be really, really good.
Mate, if you need anyone to come on and sing you a song, I've got a pretty good voice on me.
Anytime, mate, anytime.
Brilliant stuff. Well, thanks for joining us again, everyone. Make sure you subscribe to the 100% United pod on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your pods. Follow at United 100 Podcast on Instagram, and our new Twitter account at United 100 Pod 2. We'll be back either on Friday or Saturday straight after the game, depending on this news cycle. I'm hoping for some good news, and then I'll be on Friday for you guys. Watch out on our social channels for confirmation of that. Thanks for joining me today, Tim. Absolutely fantastic to have you on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me, mate.
Take care. Cheerio, Reds.